Well, Michelle, thanks for joining us today and welcome back to the physical meeting. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling okay. How about you guys?
All right, so first question, something that I've always been quite curious about, right? So I know like back in 2019, you had some hesitations on whether or not you want to join the contest. So what eventually motivated you to join the prepared speech contest?
Actually, 2019 was not the first contest I took part in. The very first contest I took part in was the evaluation contest. And that was because my husband Raymond also took part in it. And I wanted the chance to beat him and which I did. And after that, I took part in the humorous speech contest in 2017-2018. And that was simply because I am just not a funny person. So I took part in the humorous speech contest to really make myself be funny. So I'm trying to be funny there. And then the next thing will be, the next time I took part in the contest would be 2018 for the International Speech Contest. And 2019, I won the International Speech Contest. So why I took part in it, I guess it is partially also because you, my president, asked me to take part in it. So you asked me this question because you wanted some credit.
That was the proudest moment you managed to make Michelle join the contest.
Yeah, so the president asked me, and I know that I made a commitment at the start of his term to support him as much as possible. So I took part in the contest. And of course, it is also important that we take part in contests because it is the easiest and fastest way to improve yourself. It is really, you'll be able to make a quantum leap. So if you really want to improve, just take part in the contest.
Absolutely agree with that. And in Money Mastery, when you take part of contests, it's not you just going for the contest. The whole kampong will go to the contest with you.
You saw that, yeah. It's not just having the support of the whole kampong, but also you've got to work closely with your mentor. And mentorship is really the cornerstone of Money Mastery. So you work closely with your mentor and also with the different advisors at the club. And I can assure you that they really give very good advice. So all the different brains coming together will make a difference.
Absolutely. Now let's go a little bit into prepared speech contest. We know that in a prepared speech contest, some of the things are really obvious. You need a good speech, you need great preparation, but some of the things are a bit subjective. Like how much audience engagement do you need, how much humor is appropriate. So maybe let's get some advice from the champion of public speaking, shall we? So for the first part, audience engagement, I want to know audience engagement is something that we all know is good and sometimes it can be overdone. So how do you plan for your own audience engagement when you write a speech?
Planning for audience engagement. Okay, so let us have a show of hands. How many of you would like to be engaged when you're listening to a speech?
Already engaging audiences.
Thank you very much. So take a look at this. So many people. How many of you don't want to be engaged at all? Just one. Okay, thank you. And how many of you are already drifting off in your la la land and not knowing what I'm asking about? Ah, good. So the important thing is you can see just now from the show of hands that everybody wants to be engaged. You don't want to just be spoken to all the time and that's it. And so how do we plan it? You want to plan to engage your audience at the start and at the end. Why at the start? Because at the start you want to already build a rapport with your audience. And at the same time, you also want to set the context so that they kind of know what to expect. So you plan for audience engagement at the start, and then also at the end. Why at the end? Because you want to remind them of that rapport that you have with them. So start and end. Of course, in between, you'd also have to pepper it with some engagement. But we can talk about that once you've done the start and the end. Now the next thing is, how then do we do it? So we know when to include, when to plan for it. How do we do it? Well, you do it by, of course, engaging the audience, correct? And there are many different techniques. But before I even talk about the techniques, let us ask somebody, some expert maybe, as to what is the definition, according to the public speaking context, of engaging the audience. May I invite may I invite Batman? Could you please share with the audience what, in the context of public speaking, is audience engagement?
That would be probably when I'm nodding my head.
Thank you. Yes.
Probably when I'm nodding my head, or my eyes and head are fully aligned to you.
Thank you so much. And may I also invite Hakim to share with us what, in the context of public speaking, is audience engagement?
I would say connectivity in terms of the message relatability, that what you say is something that the audience can identify with through their own experiences.
Thank you so much. Indeed. So relating with the audience, how about you? What do you think audience engagement is?
I would think like it is something that you would. I know one form of audience engagement is when you ask for a response from the audience, but there are some, like a spectrum of it, like it's more big, so I guess part of it is that.
Exactly. So there are many different ways of engaging the audience. But the main thing, the main goal actually, is to get your audience interested, get your audience involved, and get them to respond. So interested, involved, and get them to respond. So how can we do that? We can do that, for instance, at the start of a speech, we can use a hook. So how do we hook the audience? Get them interested. You can ask them a question, which was what I did earlier on, asking them a question to elicit a response. You can share a joke, which elicits a response too. You make them laugh. And you can share a personal anecdote, connect them to an experience that might be shared or a feeling that might be shared. So there are many different ways to engage your audience. And at the end, you can also use the same techniques. Same thing, personal anecdote, joke, or question.
So the point is that we want to engage the audience at the start and the end of the speech so that we can start strong and end strong, and then there are many variations of audience engagement.
In between, you can also pepper some.
Yeah. So let's move on to the idea of humor. So humor is something, you're in prepared speech contest, not really in the humorous speech contest, but is humor still relevant in the prepared speech contest?
Okay, and I'd like to ask for a response from you guys again. How many of you would like to hear a dirty joke? Put up your hands. Oh, thank you. Qingli, tell them a dirty joke now. I'm kidding, no. So it is natural for us to want to be entertained. It's natural for us to want to laugh. And why is that? Because when we laugh, then there's this feeling, warm feeling, fuzzy feelings, and positive energy comes. So it's important that you want your audience to feel good when you're here on stage, right? So that's the importance of humor. Then how do we do that, right? How do we involve or include humor? Well, you can do so by really having your own joke bank. What is a joke bank? You're collecting all kinds of funny stories and jokes. You write it down somewhere. You can write it down, in an app or like digitally or physically. It's up to you. But mainly speaking, you have a joke bank to draw from. So anytime, whatever context it is, you might have something to share that will make your audience laugh. So having a joke bank is important. For instance, earlier on, think back to what are some of the things that I said, or any of the speakers on stage. What is it that they said that have made you laugh, right? So for instance, Hijazi, he said something about countries, right? About country, a good country being made by mothers. And then after that, what did he say? He said the wise man is himself. And then it elicited laughter. So you can put that down, right? Sorry, we're gonna steal from you. I'm encouraging people to steal from you. I'm very sorry. But basically, when you see that it's proven to have a positive reaction from the crowd, just write it down. And try it out next time. And other than trying it out, not just writing down the joke, but also think about how he delivered it. It can be the manner with which he delivered it. It can also be the pause after he said it, wise man, after delivering it, pause, and then that wise man is me. Something like that. So how you say it is also important. And another thing is you've got to practice. Practice telling jokes and funny stories to your friends and family. And once you've had that practice, you'll be more confident, you'll be more natural when you're trying to be funny.
Alright, thank you. And that sort of reminds me of this quote that good artists imitate and great artists steal. So here in Toastmasters, yeah, sometimes when I go to like humorous speech contests and I'll try to get some ideas and
Yes.
try and make that joke mine and put it in my own speech.
Yes.
So I think that's really very useful.
Yes.
So Michelle, I also understand that you have a reputation of being really good with your language. So perhaps could you share with the audience, what is the importance or the relevance of having strong pronunciation or trying to articulate your words on stage?
Pronunciation refers to the accuracy of the words, right? How you say the words. Enunciation refers to the clarity with which you say those words. And how important they are, it depends on your audience and the context. So over here, for instance, how many of you are able to understand the Singapore accent very easily? Put up your hands. Singapore accent, you're able to understand it extremely easily. Take a look around. Okay, so not a lot of them. So within this context, when you know that we have an international audience, not everyone is used to the Singapore accent, right? So what if I start talking, I say English all the time, and then all the time I share like that, and I talk very, very fast, and then I expect everyone to understand what I'm saying. Do you think everyone will be able to understand what I'm saying? Yeah, exactly. So you've got to see the audience. So if I know that my audience is made of purely Singaporeans who are used to it, no problems with understanding the Singapore accent at all, then sure, no problem. But now that I have a bunch who are not able to do that, then I've got to be able to make it a little bit clearer. So it's really, sometimes when people talk about accents or pronunciation, they think that it is about changing who you are, because after all, how we speak really is sort of like a reflection of who you are. And they think that, oh, if I were to change it, then I'm denying who I am. And that's not the case, and we're not asking you to become someone else. It is really about knowing your audience, being clear, and then trying to be as accurate as you can. And how can we do that? Well, in this day, there are so many different avenues to do so. We can download an app that teaches you pronunciation. You can go to YouTube, or you can engage a coach like me.
So let's say, okay, because I think one thing that I'll worry about if I try to improve my pronunciation is that I appear a bit fake, I'm trying to fake being an angmoh.
Yeah.
So with the resources, maybe in our club, how should I go about trying to adjust or find my voice in the contest? What do you think?
Well, you want to start off by knowing the accurate pronunciation of certain words. For instance, the word pronunciation is pronounced as pronunciation. It's not pronounced as pronunciation.
Pronunciation.
Pronunciation. So the verb pronounce, you say pronounce. How do you pronounce this word? But when it's the noun form, pronunciation, not pronunciation. So first, to start off, we want to be accurate. Yeah, accurate meaning the more standardized way, because we know that around the regions, there are also other considered to be accurate ways depending on the region. So like I said, audience, context. So start off by being accurate, and then about me trying to be somebody else. What is wrong with trying to be accurate? You know what I mean? It's not as if, is it right for me to be wrong and in order to be me? Okay, what I'm saying? Right to be wrong, well, whatever. So it is really about being accurate, then following that, being clear. And sometimes, especially, and another tip that I would share is to make sure that you open your mouth enough so that you can articulate and enunciate better. And how do you do that? You can imagine a hard candy in the middle of your mouth. So when you're imagining a hard candy in the middle of your mouth, in essence, psychologically, it is creating the space in your mouth so that the sounds have the room to form and come out.
That's very useful technical advice. So one more thing that perhaps we can touch on is that there are some parts of a speech contest that's straightforward. You know what is important, but what are the things that are not so obvious? What are the stage etiquette that you need to know that could improve your chances of winning a contest?
Okay, So for now, all of the competitions are online, isn't it? Right? We no longer have the physical stage. So your stage, so to speak, is actually that little rectangular frame that you have. So it is crucial that you understand framing. And I would suggest that if you're taking part in an online speech contest, to go online and look for Mike Carr. Mike Carr's speech, winning speech. He's the world champion of public speaking for 2020. So look up his video and then you can see how he uses that frame. So he starts off in one corner of that frame, right? He starts off like that. Then he moves up and then he uses the other side to good effect. So you can use that as a reference. Mike Carr, C-A-R-R, what is it called? World Champion of Public Speaking 2020. So you can refer to that if you're taking part in contests. But what about outside of the speech contest context? What about, how is it that we can use that? Well, nowadays, we are holding lots of meetings online, we're working online, so it's the same thing. Whatever meetings you are, you're also being framed. Of course, in a meeting, you don't get to use all the space. You don't start on one corner and then you go the other corner. You don't get to do that. But you've got to be mindful of how you appear to your audience. Sometimes, for instance, the background might be kind of distracting to the audience. That's one thing. And the other thing is also to ensure that your internet speed is quick enough to be able to capture your video well, that you have all the equipment necessary to ensure that your video is clear, that there's no lagging, and you use a very good microphone.
So perhaps a follow-up question, based on the speeches that you've seen online, what are some interesting ways that people have made use of the framing?
Well, like I said, Mike Carr, for instance, why do we want to take reference with Mike Carr? Simply because he's the very first world champion for the online platform. So that's definitely one of them. And a number of our own club members have also made very good use of the online platform really well. And just like what Boon Han talked about earlier on, the use of props. So when I took part in the international speech contest, it was on a physical stage and I had to use props. So I've got to find ways to hide the prop so that the audience don't see it. You don't want to give it away so quickly. That's one thing, hide it. But then you want to hide it in such a way that it's not distracting, because if I were to put a big brown bag in the middle of the stage or even to the side of the stage, people are going to be wondering, what's in that bag? Is it a bomb? Is it something? So you've got to think of ways when it's physical meeting. But when it is the online platform, just like what Boon Han said, you can pull it up anytime. You can pull up a bolster, you can pull up your cat, anything goes. And what is the impact of having all these different kinds of props? You surprise the audience. You continue to engage them. But one caveat is you don't want to use so many that it detracts or distracts. So you want to ensure that every prop you use serves a purpose.
All right, thank you. So I'm also a little interested in your process of trying to come up with a speech, because one problem that you might face is that you've signed up for a contest, but you don't really know what you want to write about. You get really stuck with the ideas. So where do you usually get your inspiration from when you have to write a speech?
I totally understand what you're talking about. You sign up for a contest and it's like, bleep, I have nothing to write about, isn't it?
2 weeks before the contest, it's just write something.
Yeah, it's just like for my humorous speech contest, it's like, I'm not funny. How do I do it? So, well, for the inspiration, you've got to ask my husband Raymond, because he is a slave driver. So, people are inspired, right? But basically, I'm driven by fear. The fear of being nagged by him. Every day he'll be asking me for something for him to look at, and so that's one thing. But of course, if you don't get nagged at like I do, then one other area you can think of is, let me use the example for my winning speech. So you heard a small snippet of it, and the title of that speech is actually Don't Do It. But my main message is really, just do it. So just do it. Sounds familiar, huh? Yeah? No? Yes or no? Yes, I see some nods. Where does it come from? Nike, isn't it? Just do it. So well known. So on one hand, you might think that, that's so cliche, she copied Nike. But on the other hand, just because it's been used, it doesn't mean that I cannot use it. Why? Because I have my own story to tell, right? So one source of inspiration is really taglines. Why taglines? Well, they've spent millions on it, isn't it? They've hired professionals have spent millions on it, and so they would have ensured that it is concise, it is impactful, and it has a universal message. So you can look to some taglines for inspiration. And earlier on during Jay's speech, he mentioned, I'm loving it, I'm loving it. Where did that come from? McDonald's. And do you think you're able to come up with some kind of story that's linked with, I'm loving it? Yes or no? Yeah, for instance, what's one possibility? Anyone would like to shout it out? What's one possible way to link it? It might be about, start with letter P, passion. That's correct. It might be about passion, living passionately, or doing things that you love, or going for your passion, right? So I'm loving it can be interpreted in a lot of ways and linked to many different things. And another way, earlier on I talked about having a joke bank. Yes? Yeah, a joke bank. So if you want to have inspiration for your speeches, what kind of bank should you have? Story banks. So joke bank, story bank. It works with the same principle, isn't it? Story bank, you're collecting different stories to share and to tell. Actually, one of the reasons why I took part in the contest is also because Raymond was telling me, take part in contest lah, you have so many funny stories to tell, so many interesting stories. So, okay, so I took part in it because I'm always sharing the different stories that I've experienced with him, and he's always enjoying it, so he says, I should share it. So Story Bank, and there's a book it's by Matthew Dix, and the title is Story Worthy. In that book, Story Worthy, it shares a lot of very good techniques in how to come up with ideas for stories to share. And there's one chapter that's entitled Homework for Life. And that homework for life is basically coming up with stories each day that you can share. And it doesn't have to be a major story. Some people think that for me to share a major story or write an impactful speech or have a strong message, it has to be something life-changing, or it has to be something that has got to do with life and death. Not necessarily. In fact, sometimes the most impactful and universal things is really the smallest, even an ordinary moment. And everyone can have ordinary moments. And from there, then you come up with your own message that resonates. Yeah?
All right, thanks Michelle for sharing with us your views. I want to open the floor up for a while so that anyone who has questions to ask Michelle, you all can ask right now. So does anyone have any questions in mind right now? Can take some time. Who is taking part in the contest this year? Please raise your hand. All right, take the opportunity. Quickly get some advice. Yes.
Ray.
Yeah, I started preparing for the contest.
Yes.
So, one question would be, Michelle, if I don't have either of the two banks, either the story bank or the joke bank, then I have like a few days to prepare and write the...
Dude, you're not prepared yet?
So, what other inspiration or fallback options do I have?
Thank you, Ray, for your question. So if you don't have that bank, well, two pieces of advice. First piece of advice is start depositing in your bank now. The second thing is if you're kind of desperate, then you ask yourself, you try to recollect, what are some stories that I have shared with my family or friends that got really good responses from them. And good responses can mean that either they are touched by it or they agree to it, they're like nodding their heads and saying, yeah, I have the same experience. And then, so think back to those experiences. I'm very sure every single one of us would have such an experience whereby you're talking with your friends and then they're either laughing or crying or sharing their own stories. So those would be the stories that you want to pick and share. Okay, Ray? Have I answered your question? Yeah.
Ray, I also just want to give a quote from Charlie Chaplin. He said, to truly laugh, you must be able to take your pain and play with it. So I'm pretty sure you have histories of pain that you can make it fun. because when you have the pain, you actually, it's relatable to most of us, and
Yes.
it's insightful, it's your story, it's
Yes.
original, and you can play with it. So.
Thanks, Adrian. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's actually a very good. That's actually very useful because in public speaking, there's always this like hero's journey thing. So when there's pain and there's always an opportunity of something that you can tell the audience that is really moving and relatable. So do we have any more questions?
Maybe one question is,
Yeah.
how do you practice the timing?
Okay.
Like basically, like like when you have comedians, they say that you need when you deliver punchline and then you wait, then audience, wait, think about it, and then deliver a story, you wait for the audience to think about it and punchline. So how do you time it?
Thank you, Henry, for the question. So the question is really about the pacing, right? And also about, just like what Hakim talked about, which is to stop, drop, and sync, right? So really trying to catch that amount of time. When I was practicing both my humorous as well as my international speech contest, the speeches themselves, firstly, I practiced in different settings at different clubs. One of them was actually Hakim's club, Jahari, right? One of them. And so I choose different settings and different audiences. And I practice those jokes, for instance, or those messages. So I practice the timing, and then I watch their responses. And I tweak according to the kinds of responses that I get. So sometimes, for instance, when you crack a joke, and then you don't pause for laughter, and then you go on to the next one, then you're not giving the audience the opportunity to absorb and find it funny and laugh. So you've got to practice how much time is needed for it. And sometimes when too much time goes on before someone gets it, it could be that your joke isn't clear enough. So it's not because the audience is stupid, no. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to tweak the amount of time. Sometimes what I do is also I will count in my mind 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, move on, something like that. So it's really about practicing in front of an audience, rehearsing and watching the audience and going back, tweaking it. Going back to my earlier advice is practice telling all of these in front of friends and family and then tweaking from there.
Thank you, Hendren, for the really good question as well. So let's take one more question, maybe from a guest. Any guests have a question? Okay, 2 more questions. I think some members are eager to ask as well. First of all, any guests? Okay, come. Can you tell us your name and the question?
Darius, can we have a microphone for him?
Hi, Michelle. My name is Darius. Yeah, I think you know me, and we talk. So my question is, during speech, or maybe in speeches, or maybe it's a competition, or in a not so formal speech.
Yes.
To what extent do you think that you should memorize a script? You should write up a script and then memorize it and then practice it for a few times. And what other instances where you don't have to practice that much, that you can just rely on you can deliver it spontaneously?
Thank you so much, Darius, for the question. So the question is about when is it that I should be practicing or memorizing it word for word, and when it is that I can just do it more extemporaneously, more spontaneously without all that preparation. When it is the Toastmasters setting for the prepared speech, we have got to prepare it word for word. That is my advice, at least. Why? Firstly, that's how we learn. We learn through the crafting. And once you have really good crafting, basically every word you've considered it a million times, whether that's the best word or not, whether it works well when you're speaking. For me, why do I have to tweak it so much? Because when I write, the writing style is actually different from speaking style. So when I write, it might look good on paper. But when I try to deliver it, I realize, wait a minute, it's a bit harder for me to say it doesn't flow well, or it sounds not fluent, not smooth. So you've got to try it out for the best effect. So it is prepared speeches and also, of course, the speech contests. You'll have to do that because that's when you truly learn and practice and hone your skills in terms of crafting and in terms of delivery. And when we talk about work setting, so work setting, again, it depends on the context, the purpose, the audience. If it is something formal, it could be a thank you speech, it could be a speech whereby you honor someone, you also want to do it this way. You want to choose your words carefully and deliver it with the greatest impact. And if it were to be something, if you're sales, for instance, sales sometimes you might want to have stronger energy. So can you do it this way in terms of memorizing? You can, but you've got to practice it so much so that it doesn't seem as if you're merely reciting it. So you can use this technique. There are some people who say that, I come here, I come on stage, and basically I only have a few pointers, and then I just speak naturally. Some people may be natural speakers and they're comfortable like that. So again, it depends on your personal style, that's one thing, because for some people they feel that if I were to prepare everything word for word, and if I forget one word, that's it, I die, that kind of thing, right? So that is a possibility. But if you've had enough practice, so the point is to practice enough. And the nice thing about the Toastmaster platform and this environment is that this is a safe place. You have all the support. It means feel free to fail. In fact, if we fail enough times, we're bound to succeed. So are there times whereby I speak extemporaneously? Well, yeah, there are. So it depends on the context and the purpose. And it depends on your own comfort level. But if you want to do your best and improve very, very, very quickly, you prepare every single word, every single pause. Sounds scary, I'm sorry.
Alright, thank you everyone for the great question. Maybe we just take one last question. Anyone? I think Hiromi?
Hiromi, yeah, wait for the microphone, please.
My question is, are there any good tips to practice pronunciation? Because I use a free voiceover
Yes.
or like a CD or
Yes.
Google
Yes.
translation. So
Yes.
I try to correct my pronunciation, but is there any good tips to
Yeah, you're using all the right things to do. So her question is, are there any good tips to practice pronunciation, especially for people for whom English is not their mother tongue? And I think for most people here, English is not our mother tongue. English is not my mother tongue either. So what are the good tips that we can use? She says that just use lots of different the voiceover, kind of, right? So yes, so one way is that you can listen to an audio recording and you can trail after it. So meaning you hear it and then you just emulate it. So emulate that. Of course you want to choose an accent that is suitable to yours, meaning that you're not practicing the British accent one time and an Australian accent another time and an American accent. You just stick to a consistent one. And the other tip that I had earlier on with you is the amount of space that you have in your mouth. So it really makes a difference. So let me show you a difference, okay? So my volume is the same right now as opposed to now. So right now my volume is the same. I'm not making myself speak any softer, or I'm not really speaking any softer or any louder. It's the same volume. But can you hear the difference between what I was saying earlier on versus what I was saying? Can you hear the difference? What is the difference?
Opening of mouth.
Exactly, right? So it's really about, sometimes we don't open our mouths enough. Sometimes we feel kind of embarrassed, and it's not just the physical mouth. So of course, when you're doing this, then it really looks very weird. But if doing this really reminds you to open your mouth more and to create the room to be able to enunciate better, then by all means, go ahead and do it when you're practicing. But after that, once you're used to doing that, then naturally your default will be you're opening it more. Does it make sense? Yeah. And also you can learn phonetics. Studying phonetics help because they show you the different parts of the mouth that is engaged. Sometimes we don't know it. We don't know which parts of the mouth is engaged. So there are certain languages whereby there are sounds that we cannot produce. And then so you can also look into those. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Michelle, for sharing with us your thoughts and all your advice. And I think as a club, we are very grateful to have a resource like you to keep sharing with all our members and to help us improve as well. So can we please give a big round of applause to Michelle for sharing today. Thank you. Any last words for the audience?
Last words for the audience would be
Contestants as well.
work closely with your mentors. and also work closely with the advisors of the club because they've had all the experience, so many years of training and coaching the speakers, and after all, they coached me.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.